Hey everybody, it's Kristen Mackintosh, the happy lawyer here at Schweitzer and Associates, and welcome to our monthly webinar series where we bring you webinars focused on events that we think are important for you to know and understand. We hold these webinars the last Wednesday of the month. This month we are focusing on the early bird gets the worm, planning for long-term care. So stay tuned. But first, a little bit about me. I am known as Kristen Mackintosh, the happy lawyer. And yes, I am happy and I am a lawyer because I absolutely love what I get to do, which is working with clients to help them with their estate planning and planning for how they're going to pay for long-term care down the road. So here's a quote I found that I thought was applicable to this webinar. Planning is bringing the future into the present so that you can do something about it now. So let's talk about how we can start planning for our long-term care future. Now, we plan for a lot of things. We plan for, vacations. We plan for dinner with friends where we're going to go eat. We plan, surprise birthday parties for our loved ones. But, what about our future care? When it comes to planning for how we will be taken care of as we advance in age, many of us out there prefer not to think about it. We believe that somehow it's all going to work out. But unfortunately, when it comes to long-term care planning, including finding the appropriate care and figuring out how to pay for it, those who fail to plan are clearly the ones who are the most at risk and the ones who risk losing the most. So let's talk about some facts and statistics. First, who's going to need care? We're all getting old. Most studies are consistent showing that 1 in 2 people will need some type of long-term care. The type, frequency, and percentage of people who will need long-term care increases greatly for those of us who are over the age of 70. The Department of Health and Human Services estimates that 70% of all people over the age of 65 will need some type of long-term care during their lifetimes.
She has Alzheimer's.
So let's kind of look at the Alzheimer's factor. Unfortunately, Alzheimer's has increased by 146.2% as a cause of death between 2000 and 2018, while causes of death from prostate cancer, breast cancer, heart disease, and HIV have all declined during that time period. Every 66 seconds, someone in America develops Alzheimer's. By mid-century, it is estimated that someone will develop Alzheimer's every 33 seconds. 1 in 10 people over the age of 65 are living with Alzheimer's or dementia. By 2050, the number of individuals aged 65 and older with Alzheimer's is projected to raise to 13.8 million, unless some serious medical breakthroughs identify ways to prevent or more effectively treat the disease. Now, I don't know about you, but these are some really scary statistics. And why am I focusing on Alzheimer's before we move into the remaining portion of this program? Well, most people with Alzheimer's are going to need some type of long-term care. Alzheimer's is a progressive disease, so a person can be diagnosed early on with Alzheimer's and then live for several years while their body and their mind continues to deteriorate, leading them to need some type of long-term care. And unfortunately, long-term care is expensive. So we need to figure out,
how will you pay?
How is this long-term care going to be paid? The average home health aid is costing individuals approximately $24 per hour. If you go into assisted living, you are looking at paying approximately $51,600 per year. And a nursing home could cost you approximately $105,850 per year. So these expenses can add up. One, they're very expensive for the first year, but think about if you're using one of these three home long-term care options, for 3-5 years, your private expenses can be eaten up pretty quickly. So let's talk about payment. How are we going to pay for these rising healthcare expenses? Well, there are a couple of options. First, you can use your savings account, in other words, known as private pay. So all of your money that you have earned throughout your lifetime, you can use to write out, those checks to the nursing home or the assisted living facility. You can get long-term care insurance that will pay for all or most of those costs for a period of time while you were in that nursing home facility. Third option is you can do some legal planning. You can consult with an elder law attorney such as myself, where we can talk about how to qualify you for Medicaid. We can talk about, if it's early enough on in the process, we can talk about pre-planning and getting you set up so that you can save all of your funds prior to qualifying for Medicaid. But if you were in the boat that most of my clients are, we're looking at crisis Medicaid planning, as in you or a loved one needs to go into a nursing home or is already in a nursing home. So we need to get that individual qualified quickly. That's known as crisis Medicaid planning, where we can save, a good portion of your assets. We can't save everything, but we can save a good portion of your assets and still get you qualified for Medicaid. Fourth option is to do a combination of one of those three previous options. Perhaps we use some savings to pay temporarily any penalties that may be incurred due to our Medicaid planning and saving assets. We might have long-term care, but maybe it's only good for a couple of years, so we need something in place to pay for those remaining years. And obviously, we're going to need some legal planning to make sure these options are being met. So now we've talked about, how are we going to pay for the care? And let's just look for a minute, though, on what we want to avoid when we're paying for long-term healthcare cost. Well, we don't want to run out of money. That's first. We certainly don't want to leave our home unprotected. We don't want to risk the health of our family or spousal caregivers, because you see, family caregivers, especially spousal caregivers, are at a far greater risk of serious health problems or even death. There were approximately 10.9 unpaid caregivers, those family friends or family members who were providing care to persons with Alzheimer's or dementia. According to the Alzheimer's Association, those persons are at high risk of developing health problems or worsening existing health issues. For example, family and other unpaid caregivers of people with Alzheimer's or another form of dementia are more likely than non-caregivers to have high levels of stress hormones, reduced immune systems, slow wound healing, new hypertension, and new coronary heart disease. And we don't want our loved ones to endure any of these issues or problems while they are caring for us. So let's look at an example of how long-term health planning can benefit you. I'm going to introduce you to Mary. See sweet little Mary here. So let me tell you a little bit about Mary. Mary is a 78-year-old woman. She's recently lost her husband after a long battle with cancer. Mary's family wanted to make sure that Mary would be taken care of in case her health should fail. She has 2 children, but unfortunately, they live in different states from Mary. And so those children, because they are what we call long distance caregivers, they're worried about Mary, and they're worried about her living alone, and because they're not there to check on her on a daily basis. Now, Mary owns a home, and she has approximately $225,000 in checking, savings, and CDs. Mary does have a long-term care policy that she's been paying for the last 20 years. And that long-term care policy provides a daily benefit of $75. So Mary pretty much has a lot of the options that we discussed. So she's pretty well off. She's better off than a lot of people. So let's look at how a typical planning for Mary would occur. So Mary's aging in place plan that we would recommend would be to keep the long-term care policy because, she's got it, she's been paying for it, let's use it. Then we're going to place a portion of her liquid assets, approximately $175,000, and her home into a family trust that her kids would oversee and could get funds from when needed. Now, Mary can't access these funds. Mary can't obtain funds directly from the trust. The trust is set up for the benefit of the children. So Mary is turning over all of her control of that $175,000 and her home. And then so that Mary's going to be able to private pay for a nursing home, because keep in mind, Medicaid has a 5-year look back that starts from the day that you enter into a facility. They're going to look back and see all of the gifts and transfers that you have made in those 5 years. And any gifts or transfers that you have made will penalize you. And how Medicaid penalizes you is they take the amount that you have given, and that determines how many months you're going to have to private pay. So we want to make sure Mary's still going to have money to be able to private pay in case, she hits that Medicaid penalty. So we're going to keep $50,000 in a revocable trust for Mary. Now, Mary can use these funds for home repairs, for vacations, anything she wants, because she has control over those assets, that $50,000. She also receives the benefits of those assets because she's the beneficiary in this trust. And then we're going to have Mary execute a financial power of attorney document, as well as a healthcare power of a document. With these documents, she's going to appoint agents, sometimes known as attorneys in fact, who are going to be able to make financial and or medical decisions on behalf of Mary in case she is unable to do so due to the decline of her health. So what does this get us? Let's look at the results of this plan. If Mary's health should fail, she will have the long-term care policy, her own funds, and her kids will have access to the family trust funds. Now, keep in mind, just because in the family trust, Mary can't receive funds directly from that trust, Mary's kids, who are the beneficiaries, can receive money from that trust, and they can use that money to help Mary pay for any private care that she may have to pay due to the Medicaid penalty. After 5 years at most, so Mary goes in the facility, 5 years have passed, all of the assets in that family trust of $175,000 would be protected and would not be counted for Medicaid purposes should Mary need long-term care. If Mary becomes unable to make decisions for herself, the financial and healthcare agents that she named in the powers of attorney will step in and make decisions for her. So this plan has accomplished saving outright at least $175,000 of Mary's assets. That will pass directly to her children. And Mary can still qualify for Medicaid. We did reserve $50,000. Remember that revocable trust that we created? And that was done so that Mary would have the funds to be able to pay for any potential Medicaid penalty if she did not make that 5-year gap before she ended up going into a nursing home. So, we have another option. What if Mary's husband had been a veteran? Well, if Mary's husband had been a veteran, then Mary is entitled to some additional benefits. You see, if Mary was a surviving spouse of a wartime veteran, either the Korean War or Vietnam, she could be eligible for a cash payment. Her health would determine how much she would be eligible for in the veterans benefits. The same type of planning as shown in the earlier slide would need to be done to reduce her income and assets to an acceptable level in order for her to get that additional funds through the veterans program. But wait. What if Mary herself was a veteran? Well, if Mary had served during a period of war and was discharged under conditions other than dishonorable, she would also be eligible for additional resources. Similar planning would be done to get Mary's income and assets to an appropriate level, because in order to qualify for Medicaid, your assets, the person who's going into the nursing home or is already in the nursing home, has to be at $2,000 or less. So, and again, Mary's health is going to determine how much she would qualify for in veterans benefits monthly. So that's another option to look at to see if you or your spouse would qualify for veterans benefits. So let's look at the worst case scenario. What if Mary had done absolutely nothing? She had done no prior planning. She didn't see an elder law attorney. She just went to into the nursing home. So if that had happened, then Mary and all of her liquid assets of that $225,000 could potentially be consumed by long-term cost. And if she stayed in a nursing home over, 2 years, keeping in mind that the average nursing home is well over $100,000 per year, that would have eaten up all of that $225,000. And sure, Mary could have qualified for Medicaid benefits if she ended up living 3-5 years longer, but her children would receive absolutely nothing from her because all of their potential inheritance would have been used to pay for Mary's nursing home cost. If Mary did not have a proper financial power of attorney in place, thousands could be spent on setting up a guardianship for her. And we want to avoid guardianships if we can, folks. Guardianships involve the court. You have to pay court filing cost, and you have to have hearings, and then it's ultimately up to a judge or a magistrate to make the decision as to who is going to have control over Mary's finances. We don't want that because it could be a stranger. I mean, they could appoint you as one of Mary's children, but if they felt like neither of Mary's children were fit or had a problem with the fact that both of her children, remember, they live out of state, a court may not like that. They may appoint somebody local, a guardian ad litem, or a lawyer in town who is on the court's list to be appointed as potential guardians. The court may decide to go that route, and that wouldn't be the best for the family. So if Mary had done absolutely nothing, there would be no funds available for her children to access to make sure she's getting the best care possible. And as we talked about it, nothing's going to pass to them upon her death. And I'm pretty sure Mary would not have wanted that to happen. So continuing on with the theme of if Mary had done nothing, if she had been a veteran or surviving spouse of a wartime veteran and she didn't apply for those benefits, then she would have left a lot of money untapped. And her choices of care would be severely limited because you can only receive the type of care that you can pay for. So, and nursing homes differ. There's some really good nursing homes out there, and there's some not so great nursing homes out there. So obviously, most of us, if we have to go to a nursing home, we're going to want the best possible care and the best facility that we can. By having money set aside in that irrevocable trust, her kids could choose, if they wanted to keep Mary at home to further help her qualify for Medicaid without any penalty for a couple of years. They can wait out that penalty period time. Let's say Mary had made the transfer to the irrevocable trust and 2 years later needed to go into a nursing home. Well, if her children were able to pay for in-home care, Mary wasn't quite that bad off, then they could use those funds in that irrevocable trust to pay for Mary's care until the penalty period, that 5 years had elapsed, and then we could get her qualified for Medicaid. Also, we would be able, Mary might be able to qualify for a Medicaid waiver program, or with a VA pension, she might be able to remain at home with care provided for her. But by doing no planning, Mary may be forced into a nursing home just to qualify for Medicaid. So it definitely, when you don't plan, your options are gonna be limited on here. So
Good to have goals.
it is good to have goals. And the goals of the long-term planning are that we want to age with dignity. We want to be able to have a say in what care we're going to receive now while we're still able to make those decisions. And we're going to want to have the best facility available for us to be able to go into should the need arise. We're going to want to be able to make sure that our kids are taken care of, that no one's going to have to be in a panic. We're also, number two, is we're going to want to avoid a guardianship. We do not want to have our loved ones to have to go to court to obtain the ability to make decisions for us. Essentially, they're going to have a court declare us, the person who needs the guardianship, to be incompetent. It's not a pleasant thing for family members to have to do, especially if mom or dad has that Alzheimer's or dementia and they don't understand why you're pursuing the guardianship, and they're very upset because you're trying to say that they are incompetent and they can't do things. And even though they may not be able to make decisions for themselves, they haven't quite grasped the understanding and realization that they really can't make those decisions. So it can create some hard feelings. So we want to avoid the guardianship. Most importantly for a lot of people is they want to protect their assets. We know we're going to have to pay something for long-term health care, potentially, but we also, and we know that we need that long-term care if we're in that position, but we also, the human side of us, wants to still leave something to our children. We don't want to use everything we've worked hard all of our lives to pay for our nursing home care if we don't have to. So the earlier you start planning, the more of your assets can be protected. And with that protecting of the assets, you definitely, in addition to those other documents, you want to make sure that you've got a will, because if there are going to be assets left over when you die, you want to make sure that you have a say in who's going to receive those assets. Because if you don't have a will and you still have assets left over, guess what? The state has already decided who will get those assets. They're going to follow that intestacy statute that we've talked to repeatedly. And with that intestacy statute, that statute doesn't care if you don't like your sibling. If they are the next in line to receive assets from you pursuant to the statute, guess what? That sibling's going to get your money. So very important to get your estate planning in line, and as part of that estate planning, to discuss long-term healthcare planning options.
That's all, folks.
Thank you, everybody. I hope I've given you something or a lot to think about in, starting your long-term healthcare discussions with your loved ones and your family members, and kind of figure out, how are you going to pay for your long-term healthcare? Because the reality is we are living longer, and the chances that we will need some form of long-term care is, greater, and it keeps growing. Our odds of ending up in a nursing home. People look, we all want to think we're going to be that, 98-year-old person who is still living in their own home in great health. But the reality is those people are far and few between. And it's better to have a plan in place and not need it than to not have a plan in place and then need it. Because again, the earlier you start, the more options you will have available to you in order to preserve your long-term, your lifetime assets and pay for that long-term health care. Again, Kristen Mackintosh, the Happy Lawyer with Schweitzer and Associates. If you have any questions or you want to, explore some long-term options that might be good for you to have in place, feel free to contact me. My website email address is on the screen. My direct dial is also on the screen, 919-535-9131. Definitely feel free to reach out to me. Are there any questions out there? Please feel free to reach me. You can also follow us at Schweitzer and Associates and the Happy Lawyer on social media. We have a Facebook page, we have an Instagram page, a LinkedIn company page, as well as a YouTube channel. And shortly after this webinar, we will be posting this video up both on our YouTube channel as well as our website and our various social media channels so that you can watch and you can forward to anyone you feel should see this webinar. Hopefully I've given you a lot of information to think about and maybe gave you some information that hadn't occurred to you before. We do these webinars, again, as I said, on the last Wednesday of every month. I do thank you so much for your attention today, and I hope you have a great day. And as I always say, stay happy.